Hey everybody, for another webinar. This one's on recognition without landmines, how to reward people fairly across union and non-union, remote and hybrid teams. Excited to get started, but in the meantime, while we have people join, I'm actually here in Madrid, Spain, doing a little traveling, a little remote work myself. I actually took a picture of my home office before I left, so that could be my Zoom background, which is kind of fun. But I'd love to have people put into the chat. I love to hear what trips you have planned this year, or maybe somewhere in the world that you've loved to visit, that you recommend other people check out. Could be right in the United States or in Canada or somewhere else in the world. I've always wanted to visit Montreal, so I should come out and meet Root in person. That'd be really fun. Yeah, it'd be cool to see Montreal. I hear it's a beautiful city. Um, I've been out to Rhode Island. Rhode Island's really cool. Awesome. I've been to San Antonio. I used to live in Austin. Great food in San Antonio. Amazing architecture along that river. Um, awesome. Ireland. Awesome. Going to Mexico. We're in Mexico. Be specific. Mexico is a big country. I love Mexico. There's so many fun places from Mexico City down to Oaxaca. Spent a lot of time. Never been to Cancun though. I should check it out. I'd love to go check out one of the cenotes. I mean, that's when, that's where the big asteroid hit, right? Dinosaurs. It'd be really cool to check out the cenotes. Guanajuato, very cool. That's a beautiful city. I've always wanted to visit Guanajuato. That's really cool. Um, Lisbon, Portugal, very cool. That's close to where I am. I thought about visiting. It's not going to happen this trip, but hopefully another time. Ann Arbor is beautiful. I know a lot of people who love Ann Arbor. Really cool. Dubai, wow, for 11 months in Dubai. Wow, that must have been really interesting, really cool. Awesome. Well, let's get into it. We're 3 minutes in. So, but yeah, please keep sharing where you've been at Disneyland. I'm sure a lot of people on this channel have been to Disneyland. I definitely have, but it's been a couple decades at least. So, very cool. Okay, well, let's get into it. So, my name is Alex Grandy. I'm the founder of Recognize, and Recognize is an employee recognition rewards platform. We're continuing to expand our offering. But I started Recognize because I saw the power of positivity. It's not so much only about, yes, if you have a culture of recognition, your employees are going to have better mental health. They're going to be more productive. They're going to stay with your company longer. But you want to create that culture of achievement. When you celebrate wins, when you create that culture of success, then you will be succeeding more, right? It becomes contagious. Winners want to work with other winners. And so you'll actually will be attracting better talent in the future. The people who aren't down with that winning culture, they'll want to leave. They'll and eventually move out of the company, right? You'll create this infectious culture of success, and that's exactly what we want to create at your company. And that's why we're here today to talk about that. Because actually, um, the thing about recognition is it can backfire. It's not always, it's not always perfect. You can't just do anything you want and then it just works out. I think we've all seen issues where recognition can feel unfair, right? Maybe if you only have a yearly celebration, right? It feels like, well, I did so many great things this year and nobody seems to notice, right? So it can backfire. Or sometimes when you have certain types of programs that are really focused on the rewards, like with a lot of our customers, we recommend a start small and grow. If you launch a recognition program and it's all about points and gift cards and Amazon, that people may try to game the system, right? Because they haven't internalized intrinsic motivation around the recognition program yet. So we often recommend starting without a rewards component, right? And we'll talk more about kind of union versus non-union with rewards later on in this discussion. But if you start off with just a recognition program, it can, and you let your staff know we're having a recognition program, and there'll be surprises along the way. They're not expecting anything, right? So then they internalize it and build that intrinsic motivation. Recognition programs can also backfire if maybe some managers are good at it, but other managers aren't, right? That managers actually feel like it's a burden, and so they don't contribute. And so you see, other teams getting recognized, other teams getting rewarded, but then your team isn't, right? And so, it can create kind of jealousy in that culture, right? You don't want that either. Um, and oftentimes with leaders, it can be hard, with things that build over time. It can be hard to see the immediate ROI of the recognition program. I know a lot of leaders can be very suspicious of almost anything or anything that involves spending any money. Kind of as a side note, I once worked at a company, almost 2 decades ago now, where this is back when the number one design tool was Photoshop, and the leadership team wouldn't even pay for Photoshop, right? And so everyone was told to use Microsoft Paint, which was pretty hilarious. And so what did employees do? Well, they need to get their job done, so they went to BitTorrent and they illegally downloaded Photoshop. And then I remember getting an email from HR saying, "Hey, everyone needs to delete illegal software off your computer." It was just a complete mess. And so even when things are absolutely needed, sometimes leaders can be hard to purchase software, purchase tools that we need. So that's why we're going to talk in this conversation a little bit about how to kind of tie the recognition to an actual ROI and KPIs. But before we keep going, we love to do polls. It's one of the great things about having a live audience here. We have about 45 people in here. So let's do the first poll here. Somewhat related to recognition is performance reviews, right? It's always nice going into a performance review, already having that feedback, already having that recognition, already set up. So you don't actually have to do much at that performance review. But there's tools out there like Lattice and Leapsome. You can do obviously a custom PDF or other choices with performance reviews. I'm just curious, what are people doing out there for performance reviews? How are you running your performance reviews? Let's go ahead and give people a moment to do that. Yeah, I think the trend with performance reviews that we're seeing is more of a continuous feedback rather than waiting once a year to do the feedback, to do a performance review. So we'll probably be doing a session in the future on that exact topic, but I'd love to hear what people are saying out there on performance reviews. Yes. Oh, small improvements. Yeah, I've heard of small improvements. Kimberly, thanks for sharing that. Custom online form. Yeah. So nobody in this group of the 45 people, 46 people now, is using Lattice or Leapsome. Just mostly just a custom online form. Very interesting. So that is really interesting. Well, we'll be doing more on that in the future. Obviously, a custom online form is an inexpensive way of running it. Oh yeah, obviously there's success factors as well. All right, let's keep going here. So into quantum workplace. Okay, interesting. So let's talk a little bit about traditional programs and some issues with them. So I touched on that a little bit, where it can be inconsistent, right? You have that traditional program. 75% of companies have their recognition program is years of service. That's it. There's nothing else other than they just celebrate when someone is at the company 365 days. Congratulations, moving on, right? That's what most people are doing. Actually, with recognition, with peer-to-peer recognition, which is what we do here at Recognize, as of 2025, November 2025, it's been reported that around 50% of companies have a peer-to-peer recognition program. when most things are kind of consistent, basically every year it's the same. Every year, 75% of companies say they have a year of service program. Every year, about 75% of companies say that they have luncheons and formal events, right? Whereas with peer-to-peer, actually, since 2016, it's increased by 10%. So 40% of companies in 2016 had a peer-to-peer recognition program. Now it's 50%. So it can be actually a strategic wedge. One way to position it with leadership is that by doing a peer-to-peer recognition program, only 50% of companies are doing peer-to-peer, and it's growing. So this is a strategic advantage that get on top of now before your competitors do it later. Because what are companies other than being driven by your people, right? Wouldn't you want to optimize your people, right? And then thus all those great things that come with that. And also as of this last year, only 16% of companies have a goal specific awards program. So we're going to talk more about how to do that. So, one of the ways, obviously, is to have specific instructions, a specific process. But a lot of traditional programs don't have instructions. They don't have a process. They don't have a result, right? It's not brought up in one-on-ones. It's so funny how people become managers often because they have specific skills, that make them, highly qualified. So they start managing direct reports, right? But are they ever taught how to give feedback, how to run one-on-ones, how to give recognition, right? So that's why it's so important to kind of create that structure and to teach people how to run a true recognition program. Yeah. So just reading the comments here from Linda. It's sad to just recognize and recognize not getting fired or leaving the company. Right? Exactly. You're just recognizing someone for maybe what's that idea? Silent quitting, right? You're still at the company. You're not really pushing yourself, and then you get recognized for being there for the whole year, right? It's kind of ridiculous. So, but there is a new playbook. It is possible what we can do. We can create a clear criteria. We can beat favoritism by having across the board recognition. We can have it all recorded in one place, right? Even custom, if people are doing custom forms for performance reviews, you can do a custom form for recognition, and then all that data is stored in one place. You can tie it to business goals as well. You can have it in the workflows you are already using, right? Things like Slack or Teams, even a Chrome extension or a mobile app. So we're going to talk more about these things in this session. So, how can you solve these things? So first of all, we want to be clear. We want to be detailed. One of the kind of ways to rules of thumb with a recognition program, with how you write those messages of gratitude or appreciation, or to celebrate those successes, creating that culture of achievement, is if you ask yourself when you're creating that recognition, writing that message, if you looked back at that recognition message 1 year ago or 1 year later, right, would you be able to know what you're talking about, right? Would you know what the message was about? Is it specific, right? There's kind of two types of recognitions. There's ones where you can say, very specifically, in the report X, you did Y, right? Whereas there's other types of recognitions where it's kind of more of a meta recognition, a pattern, something, and that patterns are great with feedback, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But basically, the idea is instead of micromanaging people and giving feedback every time you see something, you can summarize instead and say, hey, I'm seeing these patterns. And this works great with employees. This works great with the people in your family as well. No one wants to be nitpicked. And that can happen with recognition too. Jess on the call here, she gave me a really nice meta recognition recently that really meant a lot to me, which was just in general, these are the patterns I've been seeing, and I really appreciate it. So both are valid. But you want to be specific and you want to set that criteria. So it's not just, great job, it's something more specific. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Now, also visibility, right? When you have people who maybe work remotely, or you have people who are in the office, oftentimes people who are remote have lack of visibility, right? And so just kind of as an example of something that you can do, I'm gonna pull over just a basic template that you can just use as a manager, just a spreadsheet. I'm gonna give me a second to show this. So this is just a really basic spreadsheet. I believe very strongly in scorecards. So this is the idea of every week you record something. You can do this personally with your own budget. Every week, record your budget, your finances. We do this at our team. Every week we record, the sales goals, the marketing goals, right? You as a manager or the director could simply have the names of your people on your team, and then each week, did you give them feedback on something? Did you give them recognition, right? And then you can start to see trends over time. And we're only as strong as our data and the accuracy of our data. So it's really nice having this and be able to look back and see generally, how much feedback did I give this month? How much recognition did I give this month? And also, if you see a number of zeros consistently, especially on the recognition side, I mean, you don't always need to be giving feedback, right? But you should be always giving recognition, right? There should be at least 1 to 3 recognitions per employee per month as a rule of thumb. And so you can actually look back and be like, oh my gosh, I haven't give recognition to, to one of your employees this entire month. So, just having some basic templates like that you can create yourself is super valuable. So I'm going to keep it going here. 1 second. Oh, I need my notes. Awesome. And the last thing to say is, you really want to make this recognition program public, right? So it's nice having that channel in Teams or Slack, or maybe using a tool like we have Recognize, where you're having these public recognitions. Yes, it's good to also have private recognition. We'll talk about some of that cultural differences around private versus public in a little bit. But again, you want to be specific. You want to make sure everybody's recognized, no matter if they're remote or in the office. And ideally, recognition is transparent, it's clear, and it gives people confidence in the program. So another topic here is building a bias resistant program. So kind of 3 things you can do here. You can define the objective criteria, create audit trails, and then use low lift prompts. So one of the things I like to do with our customers is oftentimes we're working with HR to start the program, right? But it's not usually HR that's the ones using it, right? It's the company using it. And one of the secrets to having a great program is leadership buy-in into the program. So, as an HR manager, depending on the roles of the people in this call, operations, go to your leaders, go to the CEO, go to the C-suite, and say, and hopefully they're telling you this in the town halls that you're having, or in the newsletters, or in their weekly updates. I know great CEOs will, every Monday write a post into Viva Engage or into Slack, and try to tie the recognition program to what they are looking to do. Right? People are always going to be more on board when you're using their language. Just before this webinar, actually, I was on the phone with a friend, and she said she's going into an interview. And I said, hey, one thing I've seen that work really well, and I actually learned this from Jess, is to go to their about page. What are their values? Use their language in that interview. And that's the same way to convince the leaders of your company to get on board with the recognition program, is to use the values or the initiatives or the KPIs that are important to them in the recognition program. Because with gamification, with recognition, with that custom form, or with Recognize, you can input, right, the actual values or initiatives or KPIs that are trying to move right into the recognition program. We have another comment here. You may get to this topic, but I'm curious on how you would encourage a different mindset when employees currently value monetary recognition over anything else. We have seen that you start off with a non-monetary program, but then if you move into a monetary program, there is an uptick in engagement. People, I mean, it's actually really a great idea because the monetary component puts skin in the game. It tells the employees that the management really does care about this. They're putting money into the program. Um, so if you're trying to do things outside of that, I think one of the important things is the acronym SAPS. I believe I've touched on this in previous webinars. It's an acronym. It stands for status, access, power, and stuff. So stuff is that monetary part of motivation, but you can also status, right? Being mentioned in that newsletter, having that executive mention an employee because of a certain number of recognitions they've received. In Recognize, we have a Hall of Fame that shows the top employees across all the different criterias automatically every month, every quarter, every year. So, or maybe it's getting a new job title, right? If you are recognized over and over for, say, innovation, then you could be a now leader in innovation at the company, right? Maybe part of a committee, right? Or having the power to make a decision around innovation. Maybe you get to join a skunk group. You have access to a skunk group. You have access to a conference on innovation, as an example. So I always like to look at the status, access, power, and stuff as the levers that you can pull to motivate people. It doesn't have to always be the monetary part. It's actually, I think we all, if you think about it, especially if we're being paid adequately, getting status or access or power it's a bigger motivator actually than stuff. It does take a bit more work, right, and a bit more tie into the KPIs and leadership buy-in. But if you do it, you can have a really, really strong program that can last many, many years and have high engagement. Another comment, Linda, have you ever used Asana's one-on-one projects to help manage feedback, praise, etc.? I'll be perfectly honest, I'm not a fan of Asana. I just don't think it's very usable. I think it's kind of hard to use. I have never heard of that actually for use Asana. I've always used Asana as a project management tool to move projects along. So I hope if the community, if anyone else of the group has used Asana for that, please chime into the webinar chat. Also, hey, we're all here in this moment in life, right? So connect on LinkedIn, connect with Linda on LinkedIn, start a conversation if anyone's using Asana for that. But I'm going to look into that after the call. That's really interesting. I do want to just touch on, specific criteria. So I'm just going to pull up just for a moment our actual recognized platform. I'm just going to find it in all of my tabs here. So I'm going to tab over. Give me 1 second. Here it is. So here's an example of Recognize, and I'm not here to do a product demo or anything. I just want to show that, and you can do this with custom forms as well. So we, allow companies to put in specific criterias around the recognitions, and they can have different points and quantities and gamification. The point here is if you choose the impact maker, right, then there's a custom question. So it's nice being able to ask additional custom questions per criteria into the recognition program. And then by doing so, then you're just tying more specific criteria and making sure that you're not just creating just like a light program. It's just like, good job, right? That's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to build specific criteria, have an audit trail where everything's all stored in the same place with timestamps and approval processes. Some recognitions can be very powerful if it means that also, the HR team or one of the executives has approved the recognition, right? It's much more impactful that way. Awesome. Let's move along. So, as I touched on earlier, go to your leadership team, or maybe hopefully they're already telling you, and find out what's the most important to them and tie that into the recognition program. You really can gamify essentially anything inside of your company, make things more fun and more engaging and higher usage amongst your employees rather than just a basic form. You can tie it in with leaderboards, who's sending the most recognition, and so forth. So another important thing to mention is A/B testing, right? So if you're new to recognition, you haven't done it before, a great way to show leaders the connection between what that is and the success is by having only certain groups use programs. So I think pilot programs are nothing new to HR and operations, to test things out before you go company wide. I mean, our largest customer has 80,000 employees. We did not start with 80,000 employees. We started with a smaller group, and then it was successful. And so we continued to expand it. Again, that idea of start small and grow, crawl, walk, run, right, is another way of looking at it. Um, and then you can look at that retention data. You can look at that engagement data, right? You can tie it to specific KPIs or net promoter scores. We often recommend every week you do a employee net promoter score. How much would you recommend this organization to your friends and family? When we've surveyed people on our platform, it's an overwhelming 90% of employees on our platform say they want to stay longer with the company. 84% of employees on our platform say they better understand their company values because we're promoting them through what you just saw there a moment ago, the values. So, if you can go to leaders and say, hey, we just did a recognition program with one of our departments, oftentimes it's a technology solution. So maybe start with your IT team because they are usually pretty easy to adopt technology. And then you can do a comparison. We see now a 20% delta between the HR team or the marketing team versus the IT team with the recognition. But let's stop here for a moment and do another poll. So Rue, if you want to help out with the poll, I've been touching a little bit on feedback earlier on. I'd love to do another poll on feedback. Actually, recognizes we're looking into adding a feedback module. So let's pull up the feedback poll. So I'm curious, how are you doing feedback? While we're filling that out, I'm going to pause and pull something else up as well. Yeah, so how are you doing feedback? Is it ad hoc? Okay, here we go. I'm curious. I love that. Nobody's doing AI. I got 25 responses. No one's using AI for feedback. People are doing it ad hoc, manager driven. Who knows how they're doing it, right? Who knows how well they're doing it. Um, I just think that this is a huge opportunity, a strategic advantage. If you teach your managers to use the right tools, we're looking into adding in an AI feedback tool and to recognize so that you not only will have recognitions, but also feedback. And so if that's interesting to you, please hit us up. We'd love to talk to you more about that. I'm going to give an example of how to it's not totally on topic, but just briefly, I want to show something because if you're not doing recognition, it's really hard to then give feedback, right? If you're a company that's just complaining, that's just constantly critiquing, that's criticizing, a culture of criticism is going to be a negative culture, and you're just going to have a downward spiral, right? We need a culture that uplifts people, right? And so one of the things that's big big topic on my mind is instead of giving feedback to someone every time you feel like you need to, you actually, because, hey, we've all been there. We've been managers or we've seen feedback or we've seen mistakes and it can frustrate us, right? And it's almost like we need our own little corporate therapist to help us walk through it. And the amazing thing is now having AI to do that. So, and the nice thing is if you can use ChatGPT project or a Gemini gem. I'm going to just share my screen just briefly. So this is totally made up. This is just an example. But you can do is you can create a gem for specifically around an employee. And you can ask, like, hey, let's say you have a policy at the company that people need to respond within 4 hours, but someone didn't get back to you for 24 hours. You're frustrated this person did not get back to you in time, right? The AI can actually ask you questions. Is this a first time offense? When was the 4 hour rule explicitly discussed, right? And you can actually talk to it, and you don't have to, put in any sensitive information. It can be very general, right? And you can actually talk through the situation with AI, and then it can help you communicate, explain what you saw in that next one-on-one. And what's really nice is you can continue to record these things over time, and it will remember. And then at the time of that one-on-one, you can ask the AI, you can ask the Gemini or whatever you're using, hey, summarize the feedback for the last week, right? Detect any patterns you're seeing. And then you can go in that one-on-one or that performance review, or maybe just an ad hoc meeting, like, hey, I love to talk about a couple things on responsiveness. Do you have 5 minutes, right? And get on the call, and now you can talk about things in a general way, in a respectful way, in an empathetic way. So I think AI can be a really incredible tool in that way. And also, if you're recording recognitions, AI can also be used to summarize that as well. Every month, our team, I'll go ahead and minimize that. Every month, our team actually goes over the recognitions of the last month. And it's nice to have a summary of the patterns it detects that it's hard to see yourself, especially if you have a lot of data. It can synthesize and summarize that data, which I think can be really, really powerful. So something to explore. Very cool. Okay. Okay, a couple things on the union employees here. Unions are a bit different, right? You have to be very, very careful about the collective bargaining agreements that you have. So a couple things you can do. So first of all, definitely take advantage of a non-monetary recognition program, right? So there can be shout outs, award certificates, badging. If you already have a budget set aside for swag, put the swag into the program. Have some of the swag be winnable through a recognition program. In Recognize, you can accumulate points and you can redeem swag in our store. And so if you already have that earmarked for swag, put a percentage of that as rewards. Easy, right? And I also love team recognition. So you can do this easily in your custom form, or you can do this with Recognize, where we sync with HRIS, right? UKG or Workday or whatever. Pull that data into Recognize or whatever you're using, and do department level recognition, do team level recognition. We have what we call the recognition engagement score, so the RES as we call it. So what's the percentage of people being recognized or sending recognition in your company? I'm not going to talk about what you should do, what's like a good kind of benchmarks there. But when you recognize an entire team or an entire department, you're going to hit those numbers on the RES. And then it's a group effort. I love that kind of collective group effort. Linda has a question. Would you suggest using a similar process as the union environment for recognizing member participation for a nonprofit association? That's a really good question. I don't have, let's see, for recognizing. I'm not exactly sure, Linda, if you can expand on that a little bit more in the chat, and we'll get back to you on that. That's a good question. I'm not fully understanding it yet, but please feel free to continue to expand on that. Awesome. I'm just going to check on one thing real quick while I'm here. Okay, just making sure, just checking something out. Yeah, so again, when you have clear criteria, you use group recognition, you use non-monetary recognition, possibly use a percentage of your swag budget for the rewards component, use gamification, right? The Hall of Fame, award certificates, things like that, all valid within, and obviously when creating that collective bargaining agreement, look into how you can incorporate some kind of program into that. So awesome. Right. Okay, let's just do one more before I go into remote work. Just following up with Linda's response that she worked for a real estate association with 9,000 members. Many of them participate in activities, provide feedback, etc. And they need to be recognized. Yeah. So, well, I can say, at least with our tool, Recognize, we have programs where it's many different members, right? Or maybe like universities, right? Where people have different email addresses, people are part of different departments or different sub orgs, and they can all be in one program with Recognize to motivate people like member associations. Um, so that's really interesting. But it's not just one company; it's association. Um, so yeah, I mean, even with Recognize, you don't even have to have an email address. There's a lot of deskless employees, right? People in the field. We have companies that have employees who are putting up fences, right, at events and things like that. Security guards, right? And we connect with them through text messaging. We connect with them through their phone, right? They don't have to have a work email address or even an email at all to be recognized. And that's what's also great about using award certificates. We generate award certificates with every recognition that's created, and it can be printed out on a standard 8x10. And then you can physically hand that to somebody in that weekly huddle. So yeah, there's ways with technology now that you can really connect with anyone, anywhere, either with third-party tools recognized or through some kind of homegrown solution. So if I didn't fully answer your question, Linda, please hit me up on LinkedIn, or I think my email is going to be at the end of the presentation. And I'm more than happy to get on the phone and talk more about that. Yeah. So actually, that was kind of on the topic of, I mentioned SMS, I mentioned mobile. It's so important to have all of this in one place. You're going to get so much more out of it, right? Because you're going to have actual analytics that can tie into it. I think I'm going to touch on this in a little bit, if I remember from my notes. But data is so critical now. Especially in the age of AI, right? The better organized you are in the data entry now, the more you can mine that data later, right? The better you can mine that data. So you want to keep everything all in one place. One of the kind of more important things here on this slide, one of the big takeaways, is that local region considerations. So actually, I remember being at a pitch contest in Silicon Valley about 10 years ago. And there was a Latin American team that pitched their startup idea. And when the person, the CEO of the group, finished, they all were hugging and cheering and high-fiving each other, like this kind of big outward expression of gratitude. You just don't see that so much with, let's say, Europeans or right. And there's no, right or wrong way of doing things, but, depending on the makeup of the company, socialism versus other types of forms, there can be different types of interest in how you do recognition, right? Which is why I touched on earlier, it's always good to have a program that allows for private versus public recognition. If you only have a private program, then it's hard to celebrate those wins and create that momentum of success and achievement. But when people go extra above and beyond, or maybe there's a large monetary bonus tied to it, then you're going to want to have that be private, right? And so you want to be sensitive to cultural differences. It's not always easy to do that, but the more you think about it, the better it will come about. Just to read a comment here from Alex: similar to when flying internationally, people clap upon landing, whereby that doesn't happen domestically. You know, I have visited Israel, and people always clapped when they arrived in Israel, and I thought that was I thought that was specific just to Israel. And then I landed here in Madrid just a few days ago, and everyone cheered, and I was just and clapped. I was totally shocked. I was like, I mean, it was a bit turbulent coming in, so I thought it was maybe because it was a little turbulent. But yeah, it's really funny when people clap upon landing in a plane. If you do that, let's say landing into San Francisco, people will give you a weird look. So yeah, it's such a funny point. There's so many funny cultural differences, which is why I actually just read that traveling can be more effective than therapy, right? Just being exposed to different types of people, being exposed to how people live can be so powerful. So get out there. That's another kind of takeaway from this kind of sub theme is getting out there and experiencing different cultures. And then obviously then you can look at the analytics. The better you have data, the more you can look into, what is the recognition engagement score for different regions. You want it somewhat similar. But obviously, like for instance, I was interviewing a manager at Amazon, and he said, I am self-motivated in my role. I don't need recognition every week, but I wouldn't mind a recognition once a month, right? To be reminded that I'm doing a great job. Whereas if you're a frontline nurse and burnout is high and you're understaffed and you're dealing with some serious situations on a daily basis, a weekly recognition is much more impactful. So there's a lot of little nuances that need to be considered, but just doing anything is better than doing nothing, right? Like, don't get bogged down in the details. If you meet with leadership and they say, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? Just tell them, hey, let's just get started on something very basic and let's iterate and learn and A/B test and grow with time, because it's not an if, it's a when, right? Because if we don't do it, then our competitors are going to do it, and there's going to be a more attractive place to work, and they're going to be more advantage in it from an ROI perspective as well. Awesome. So, as been talking about using digital solutions, recognize we're in, for instance, Microsoft Teams. We're one of the leaders in Microsoft Teams, and and the reason we're so successful is then you don't have to leave your workflow. Put your main strategies and tools in what you're already using. That's what I love about things like Microsoft Teams or SharePoint or intranets is you can choose best in class solutions and have them all in one place, right? There are tools like Viva Engage or Workday that have kind of they're like a jack of all trades, right? They do a couple things really, really well, but then they've added a bunch of other things like recognition. They're not doing it. They're doing okay, but they're not like as they don't have like discounted concert tickets in multiple countries as rewards, like Recognize, right? But if you're using a SharePoint or an intranet or Teams or even a Slack, you can combine all the best in class tools all into one place. And a lot of times be paying the same amount of money if you were using the more advanced Workday, right? Another thing, we touched on this in a previous webinar, you want to have those reminders, create a 5-minute open calendar event on Friday morning that you invite all your managers to, all your directors, and it's a moment of recognition. Take 5 minutes out of your day to, hey, what are some wins that you can celebrate this week, right? Create that culture of recognition, create that culture of celebration, so that, hey, when you celebrate wins, you're going to get more wins, right? It's going to be contagious. You want to create that contagious vibe in your company. And, as far as like templates and things, I have a link there. Oops. Let me go back. I have a link at the bottom of 10 examples of appreciation. Like, if you get a recognition that says, thanks for doing the right thing, versus your integrity is reflected in the quality of your work, your interactions with your colleagues, and your commitment to the company values. You're always doing the right thing, even when it's not easy. And that is a testament to your character. Isn't that a lot more impactful than just saying, thanks for doing the right thing? This reminds me of a meme that I just saw bouncing around the internet in the last 24 hours. I'm going to pull that up here. Just give me a second. I wanted to show, oh, come on. Why are you not letting me move it over? Give me 1 second. Here we go. Okay, so you may have been seeing this on the internet. This is new to me in the last 24 hours. So if it's been going around longer than that, but I've been seeing this on the internet the last 24 hours where reality, I chased a squirrel. LinkedIn, Proud to announce that I effectively executed a rapid response squirrel displacement strategy to mitigate potential yard intrusions. Right? It does sound a lot better, I have to admit. Maybe I'm just a sucker, but you want to elaborate is the point. You want the recognitions. If you were to look at it a year from now, you would know what you're talking about. I've learned this the hard way myself because with Recognize, we have employees who join the company and they're here at Recognize for many many years, right? And so one thing that we do on their 5-year anniversary, for instance, is we go through recognitions that they've received for the last 5 years, and it's really fun to be like, oh, remember that, remember this. But sometimes I read the recognitions and I was like, what is this? I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking. I said this recognition 4 years ago. I have no idea what, great work with the customer. It's like, which customer? And what was the great work? I don't, so be specific. If you were to look back at that, would you remember it? Right. So, and put that into the prompt, put that into the template to, help managers along. They don't want to, there's that great usability book called Don't Make Me Think. And I think that applies to a lot of things. Don't make me think about how to create a great recognition, right? Especially, I think a lot of us did not grow up with positive reinforcement, with our parents or with our families, with our teachers, those teachers that made a big impact on us, or maybe that uncle or aunt that was really meaningful to you, they often were positive, right? Think back about, how that made you feel. There's a study that found that we underestimate the impact of gratitude, right? If you do something nice for somebody, you buy them lunch, I was just, in the airport and the escalator wasn't working. And someone had a really large suitcase and I said, hey, can I help you carry that up the escalator? Right. I didn't think much of it myself, but that probably meant a lot to that person. We underestimate how much it can impact somebody. So, put that into a template. Remember, what you say to someone is going to make a big impact on their day. It's going to motivate them throughout the rest of their week. So I touched on earlier, look for patterns in the feedback, look for patterns in the recognition. You can only do that if everything's being stored in the same place. Data is more important than ever. Again, a great way to sell a recognition program to leadership is, hey, this is a great way to have data on the successes of the company, and then we can analyze and correlate with KPIs to then have even more success the next year. So, retain those records, look for patterns, right? And capture those essentials. When did it happen? Who sent it? Who received it? What was the category or value or specific behavior that you're trying to promote? Also, something to consider in Recognize, we have what we call challenges, where you can report when you've done something. You don't have to just wait for someone to recognize you. You can report that you've completed that training, that you hit that goal, that you got that great review on Google because you did such a great job in customer service, right? That is all data that is now being stored in one place that then can be analyzed at a future date. If we had known what AI could be doing 10 years ago, think about what kind of decisions we would have made with our data 10 years ago. So something to consider and to relay. There's the idea of FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. Tell your leaders, hey, we don't want to miss out in the next 5 years in how to really take advantage of our most strategic asset, our employees. All right, kind of rounding out, almost finishing up here. So just kind of a base stats, some things that you want to see to show the health of your recognition program. So you do want to see around 70% of your managers giving recognition on a monthly basis. You also want to see that on a monthly basis, around 85% of the companies being recognized once per month. You can have success on that if it's on a quarterly basis as well. So if you have 85% of your employees being recognized at least once in a quarter, you're doing better than most companies. And you want people to be receiving recognition, ideally 1 to 3 times a month. That's always the best. But in a worst case scenario, 85% of your employees are recognized on a quarterly basis. So we have one more poll, and that is on, how effective is your recognition program? So, Rue, if you want to pull up that poll, thanks so much. So, yeah, we're curious, how effective do you think your recognition program is? Or maybe you don't even have one, which is perfectly fine. Share if you have a program or not. And if you do, how effective is it? Yeah, so Brendan asked what kind of company size. Yeah, I don't have maybe Jess has the answer to those stats. We see this on average. So we work with companies that have 50 employees. We work with companies with 80,000 employees, and these are averages that we see across the entire spectrum. Obviously, yeah, and one more thing I'll mention for Brendan's um, point there is that it can be different, obviously, with frontline. If we have a company that's a technology company, they are going to have higher numbers. They're at their desks, they're in teams, they get it already. They don't need to be taught how to use a digital recognition program. But if you have, let's say, field staff primarily, right, technicians, it's going to be lower on the amount of recognitions just because they're not at their desk. I'm going to go to Linda's point in a second here, but just to show moderately effective is the biggest 46%. So that's really interesting to see that people are on average saying they're moderately effective, which is good. I think that's overall good. And then 13% extremely effective. That's great. 30% of people that don't have a recognition program, we'd love to talk to you. It's really easy to set up something with Recognize, or we can just talk about how to set one up for you. That's ad hoc. You don't need to use any third-party tool. For the 13% that says not effective, I think it's always good to take a look at what you're doing now. Maybe it's too ad hoc. Maybe it's too general. You haven't tied it to the KPIs. The leadership doesn't have buy-in. They don't fully understand that it's not just to make people give attaboys to employees, but it's actually to create a culture of success. Right? When you go into that feed and you see all these awesome things happening in your company with people that you may not even work with, that is energizing. That's an energizing experience. Go ahead and reading. I'm going to go ahead and read Linda's comment. We used to use the Praise app through Teams, but that has stopped. Enjoyed using the app because we were encouraged to recognize our peers, not just having praise come from the top down. Yeah, totally. I mean, plus as a manager, oftentimes managers are busy. They don't want to be the ones pulling everyone along on a recognition program. When they have those peer-to-peer recognitions happening, and then they can just go ahead and review those, they just, you don't have to always just be recognizing. You can comment on recognitions. You can like a recognition. With Recognize, you can give additional points to someone by boosting recognitions. So, that's really interesting as well. So take a look at that. All right. Rounding it out. So I always like to have something that you can take away, something that you can do. So in the next 30 days, can you talk to leadership? Can you tie your recognition program to business outcomes? In the next 60 days, can you do an A/B test, right? Can you have a couple departments doing a recognition program and the other group isn't? Maybe if you already have a recognition program, maybe you can do something differently that you didn't learn before. Can you see a delta change, an improvement, right? A relationship between the change and that group versus the control groups. In the next 90 days, can you take those lessons and then apply it to the whole company, right? So I challenge you to take one thing away from this in this webinar. Just do one thing ideally. And one thing I did for the beginning of my year for 2026 is on my whiteboard at home, I have January, February, March, April, May, June, and I have goals, right? And I'm working backwards. I have my own personal goals, things like meditation, but I also have company goals too. And so, hey, for February, we'll do X. In March, we'll do Y, right? And you can do small steps to make sure that by December, you've hit your goals. So something to consider to do with your own personal life, with your family, and with your company and with your work. Very cool. Yeah, so as Jess posted, we have another webinar coming up um, next week. So stay tuned to that. We'd love to have people join. We have a special guest, Ellen Butler. She is she's an expert in employee experience design. So I'm going to get to have an experience where I'm going to get to have a discussion with her, kind of a Q&A back and forth discussion with her. She's fantastic, and it's an opportunity to learn more about Ellen. To always sometimes it's nice to hire a consultant, have them come in and meet with your team, do some changes. Not always a technology solution like Recognize, but actually getting some help and some advice from an industry leader. So we're really excited to have Ellen next week. So, and we're doing webinars now almost every week. So stay tuned on things next. Follow us on LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn. It's easy to find me, Alex Grandy on LinkedIn. My email is just alex@recognizeapp.com. And yeah, thanks everyone for this past hour. It's been really great. Have a great rest of your Wednesday evening and take care. Thanks, everybody.